Okay, so this afternoon, I have a feeling that this afternoon is going to fly by. All the speakers make a tremendous contribution to AV, and I put a little bit of thought into the scheduling, obviously, but even with beyond that, there always seems to be a natural flow, and I think you're going to see how that unfolds through the remaining speakers, and it's all going to be pieces of the jigsaw that will complete that picture. And Olsi Jazexhi was introduced to me by Patrick Henningsen. They actually met at a conference in Tehran, I believe, in Palestine. Our conference on Palestine in Tehran. Yeah. And so Patrick suggested to me that he'd seen Olsi speak, and he said, I can absolutely recommend that you're going to want him to speak at an AV event. And I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to tell you that I hear that many, many times through the year. And people make recommendations, and it's a tough call. But I spent 45 minutes or so on the phone with Olsi, and there was no hesitation. I mean, after 45 minutes, or even before then, I'd made my mind up that the AV audience absolutely need to hear what Olsi Jazexhi has to say. So it's a tremendous pleasure. He's come all the way from Tirana in Albania to be with us for the weekend. And it really is a tremendous pleasure to welcome him to the AV platform.
Hello, everybody. My name is Olsi. And as you already understand, I'm not a native English speaker. So I hope you'll pardon my French, as you say. And my presentation is today mainly about this nice guy, that he behaves himself as a supreme leader, or as a kind of His Majesty, in my home country, which is Albania. And this other guy is our present Prime Minister. So this is a picture from the year 2013, when Mr. Tony Blair got a new position in Albania as a chief advisor to our government. So, as you can understand, they are here in a cabinet meeting. I'll show you later on a picture with all our government ministers. And Mr. Blair is giving his holy fatwas, or since he's a Catholic, I would say his holy bullahs, religious verdicts to our government for obedience and compliance. So the title of my presentation is From Soros to Blair, Pillaging the Wealth of Nations. I'm going to explain what is going on with a number of nations in Eastern Europe, and not only Albania. And in a way to make you understand why we Albanians, Ukrainians, Romanians, and so forth, like so much to leave our beautiful home countries and come and invade your beautiful England, and Great Britain, by the way. So here's the map. This is Albania, this is Macedonia. All this region here was part of the former Republic of Yugoslavia. Here is Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and so forth. And here is Greece, and here is Italy. Now, as you might know, until the year 1990s, 91, we were part of the Eastern Bloc of the socialist countries. And in the time, most of us had a much better life than we have nowadays. We had free health care, free housing provided by the governments, we had secure jobs, and life was not as difficult as it is nowadays. But what happened? We have a number of major events that happened in the history of Europe in 1990s. We have the beginning of the destruction of the Soviet bloc. The events started in Albania, we have anti-communist protest in 1989. In Soviet Union, we had perestroika and glasnost, two major reforms by which the Soviet leadership tried to reform the Soviet system. And then we had explosion of massive popular revolts from Romania, which culminated with the killing of the president of the country, Ceausescu, in 1989. Then we have the resignation of Gorbachev in December 1991, the creation of the Russian Federation, and Albania, as part of the communist bloc that it was going to follow the major changes that happened. So in 1990, we have the communist government, which in a way tried to reform the system, because I have to explain something. Even though we had free healthcare, a guaranteed job, and free housing, the life was not as pleasant in the communist bloc. We had massive censorship. Of course, we didn't have the big brother society that you have here in UK, where even when you go in the park, there is a camera watching you. We had more primitive spies who were following us and taking notes, and sometimes even lying about what we were doing. So we have a number of protests, which in 1992 led to the dissolution of the People's Republic of Albania, and we have the creation of the Republic of Albania. Then, after the collapse of communism, our great friends, the Americans, came in the country, and they told us that we had to destroy our state. This is James Baker, Secretary of State, who came in Albania in 1991, if I'm not wrong. This is the major square of Tirana. And in his famous speech that he held in Albania's capital, among others, he told to us, the Albanians, that we had to destroy all the economy of our country. Albania was a self-sufficient economy. We were producing everything in our country, from shoes to tractors. We had a fantastic agriculture, we had factories, and our people were all employed. And of course, we had a very good health system. Of course, it was not as modern as the standards are nowadays, but it was good for the time. But with the coming of the Americans, and I want to remind you that this is the time when soon after we have the first Gulf War, the first war against Iraq, and we have George Bush the first, the American president, who said, now we live in an era of a new world order. So this new world order, which was reshaping itself in the Middle East, was showing its results even in Eastern Europe. So here we have James Baker, who comes to Albania and who tells to our leadership that for us to be fully embraced by the free, liberal, democratic, capitalist West, we had to destroy our factories. We had to destroy our economy. We had to burn our greenhouses. We had to steal the glasses from greenhouses and to send them to our home. We had to go into factories, which were public factories owned by the workers, and put them in fire. This is what happened in our country from 91 to 96. There was a massive looting. People who until 1991 were teachers, were doctors, were soldiers, were farm workers. From 91 to 94, they were very happy because they were stealing what they had built before. And the slogan of the time was, we have to destroy them, because James Baker promised us a blank check. This is what he said. America will give you a blank check and you will build everything from the beginning. But what happened is people suddenly understood that there is no blank check coming from the US, and they were left jobless. And what did they do next? I don't know how many of you have seen these pictures. These are pictures of port of Duros in Albania, where Albanians who were very poor, impoverished, jumped on ferries and they escaped to Italy. And from Italy they came to Britain as well. What happened with the Albanians happened with Ukrainians, with Romanians, Bulgarians, many Russians, Serbs, and what have you. However, if in Albania the destruction of the country was very quick, in some other countries, like in Yugoslavia, where the Yugoslavs, in contrast was, in Albania, had a half socialist, half capitalist system, the destruction of the economy went slower, and you didn't see, as many Serbs to leave their country as the Albanians did. Now, after the destruction of our economy, many Albanians became, as probably maybe many of you might remember, very violent criminals, drug dealers, traffickers who were selling Romanian, Albanian, Moldovan prostitutes in Western capitals. And people started to make a lot of money. What happened next was we had pyramid schemes installed in the country in 1996, where people were lured into those Ponzi schemes and were told that if you give us $1,000, after a month I'll give you $2,000. If you give us $2,000, after a month I'll give you $4,000. This thing happened while the Americans were fully controlling Albania. I mean, since the collapse of communism in our country, almost every prime minister that we have, every government minister that we have, before being elected, doesn't get permission from Her Majesty, the Queen of London, but from the American ambassador who sits in Tirana. He's our supreme leader. I mean, we don't worship him like North Koreans worship their leaders, but we fear him. So we had the pyramid schemes, and we have a civil war in the country, which lasts from 96 to 98. In this time, we have the breakdown of the state. Albania, in a way, became like Syria nowadays. But of course, we didn't have Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS and what have you, since Albanians were theologically too inferior to understand this kind of Islamic terminology. But we have other bands of simple criminals who, of course, they had the same Kalashnikovs that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and other terrorists have nowadays in Syria. And by the way, much of the weaponry that Syrian and Libyan terrorists have nowadays have come from Albania. So even though our criminals, they had the same weapons as the terrorists have today in Libya, they were not ideologically motivated, or, for example, when they were killing each other, they were not saying Allahu Akbar, but they were simply killing each other, and that's it. Now, after the chaos that many journalists and analysts in Albania and outside believe that was orchestrated by the Americans, we have, during the time of the chaos, we have the breakdown of the Albanian state. We didn't have a government for many months. The country was split into south and north, and Tirana, the capital, being on its own, like we have today Syria or Iraq with Sunnistan, Kurdistan, Shiitistan. And during this chaos that was created in the country, we had a massive flow of weapons towards Kosovo. Yugoslavia could not complain about it for a simple reason, because Albania was not a state. Where were they going to complain? Albania didn't have any government. So we had a massive flow of weapons and fighters into Yugoslavia, who in '98, they launched the war with the so-called Kosovo Liberation Army. And by the way, the president of Kosovo today is the ex-commander. I mean, yeah, like we have, for example, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Syria today. So we have the export of conflict in Yugoslavia. We have a revolt and the Serbian security forces who go to crush the revolt. And then we have the NATO intervention. NATO intervenes, it bombs Serbia and forces the Serbs to accept the autonomy of Kosovo. Until today, the status of Kosovo, according to a United Nations agreed resolution, is that it is an autonomous province of Yugoslavia. Of course, the Albanians were very happy with their British and American liberators. And here we have today the state of Kosovo. If you go in Pristina, you'll see a big statue of, he resembles a bit like Saddam Hussein, but is Bill Clinton in the center of Pristina. And you see his posters. And the Kosovars, in a way, they worship the Americans and the British. They say, these are our liberators. The love of Kosovars for the Brits and the Americans is so strong, as we have many little Tony Blairs in Kosovo. So what happened after the war, when many Kosovars were having children, they were naming them George Bush and Tony Blair. Nice name, isn't it? So after the NATO intervention in Kosovo in '99, in 2008, we had George Bush, who gave his final fatwa and said Kosovo should be turned into a state. And even though Serbia, or Yugoslavia for that matter, protested against this, and more than half of the members of the United Nations, do not recognize Kosovo until today as an independent country, the Americans said it, and it was done. In 2008, the Kosovars declared their independence. They had their constitution written by Martti Ahtisaari, and under the supervision of the Americans. And even though the Kosovan society is 95% Muslim, and the society is very traditional, nothing of this was taken into consideration, and the constitution was written as their colonial masters, liberators, wanted to be written. And here is the Declaration of Kosovo, a poster which shows the happiness of the Kosovars with the great liberator, or you might call it even more criminal, George Bush. Now, here is where I come into my presentation. Because here we are to, in a way, deconstruct the plans of the global elites. Why do they make wars? Do they make wars because they love Syrians? Do they make wars because they love the Kosovars and Albanians? Here is your famous Tony Blair in Kosovo after the NATO invasion. Here is Wesley Clark and your Michael Jackson here. And here is Hashim Thaçi, the present president. He was previously Prime Minister of Kosovo. And here is Kushner, Bernard Kushner, who under Sarkozy, he was foreign minister, if I'm not wrong, right? So here is after the British and American troops intervened in Kosovo, they removed Serbian troops, and they placed their own troops to guard the new province that they took from Serbia and they annexed it for NATO. Now, after the war, what happened? The Americans started a massive process of privatization. Kosovo had a better economy than Albania because Yugoslavia was a much more progressive country than Albania in the communist bloc. The economy of Kosovo was a socialist economy. People in towns like Prizren, Pristina, Mitrovica, Đakova, they had public factories. People were producing their own food, they were producing clothing, they were producing tires, they were competing with, even with famous Western tire companies. They had very good industries. But what did the Americans do since during the war? First thing is, for those who have followed the war in Yugoslavia, quite often they were not bombing the Yugoslav army, but they were bombing factories, Serbian factories, and Kosovar factories as well. And after the war, what they did, USAID, who took over the the reconstruction of the Kosovar state and who was the main sponsoring agency, started a massive process of privatization. Companies who were very profitable were taken over by American companies connected with the US government. The process of privatization and of stealing state assets from the Albanians did not happen in Kosovo only, but even in Albania. Here we have General Wesley Clark, the guy who led the NATO invasion of Kosovo, who took over the oil of Albania, the oil refineries of Albania, and who today runs one of the major, or the only extracting oil company of Albania, which is called Bankers Petroleum, and I'm going to show you in a second of the fracking and what the destruction they're doing to the locals. We had Madeleine Albright, who wanted to privatize Kosovo Telecom, but since this news caused much scandal, they usually bring second companies in order to save their names. And now, coming back to Wesley Clark, here we have Bankers Petroleum, a Canadian-American company, and look what they are doing. This is an explosion caused after fracking. This is water coming out of the land, destroying people's houses. We have towns which are flooded by water, and this is after they do the fracking.
Mjedisit ka pezulluar aktivitetin e kompanisë kanadeze Bankes Petroleum pas aksidentit të ndodhur mëngjesin e sotëm në zonën naftëmbajtëse të Patoz Marinzës. Nuk do të lejohet rifillimi I punës nëse nuk merren masat për trajtimin e mbetjeve. Shpërthime të fuqishme kanë nisur që prej orës 5 të mëngjesit në fshatin Marinz. Disa puse nafte kanë shpërthyer njëri pas tjetrit duke terrorizuar banorët.
As you can see, they're doing the fracking under people's homes. They have their homes destroyed. This is the same video. This is another one.
Ky është shpërthimi në pusën e naftës numër 8 të kompanisë Bankers Petroleum mëngjesin e kësaj të mërkure në fshatin Marinz të Fierit. Shpërthimi ka ndodhur rreth orës 6 në mëngjes, gjatë kohës kur një nga grupet po punonte për shpimin e pusit të ri në zonën naftëmbajtëse, përhapja me forcë e gazit fare pranë zonave të banuara, fatmirësisht nuk ka lënduar njerëz, por ka sjellë dëme të shumta materiale. Por ndotja ka ardhur duke u rënduar nga minuta në minutë, duke krijuar një situatë alarmante. Në pak minuta ujrat nëntoksor të përzier me argjil janë shpërndarë me shpejtësi dhe 200 metra larg pusit, duke hyrë në banesat dhe tokat mbytësore.
Water is entering and is destroying people's homes.
Me një lartësi prej rreth 100 metra, shkërimi i gazrave helmuese ka tmerruar banorët, të cilët janë larguar me shpejtësi nga shtëpitë.
Tash mëngjesit kur u ngrita dëgjova pusin që po bën nga blum nga toka, unë u trema. Tash u s'kam nga kalon. Me shtëpi, me lot, me tëra hajde vini vetë do.
Kjo është një rrezik i madh për banorët për të gjithë.
People are abandoning their homes because they cannot live anymore.
Është komplet, nuk është vetëm një grup dy këtu që shif.
Jemi me fizik ku qëndrojmë, ku të vemi. Ku do vemi ne me këta kaq të vegjël, me fëmijë 1 vjeçar?
Ka rrezik të mëdha i fshati, është gasa dysaj helmus.
Policia dhe autoritetet vendore kanë marrë masa duke bërë evakuimin e banorëve nga zona e rrezikut.
Vazhdonte shpimin, me sa di unë, me sa më kanë raportuar, i kompanisë Bankers, ka shpërthyer fontana, nuk e dihet në çfarë thellësie, dhe ajo çka është më e keqja, kjo ka marrë damar të tokës, të ujësjellsave, të kanaleve të ujrave të zeza, dhe siç e shikoni gjithë.
And the destruction of the environment was so strong as people could not even use their water that they have through wells, even for washing their clothes. The whole water, underground water, had been poisoned.
Me karrocdore janë mbledhur në hyrje të fshatit, ku në mënyrë të organizuar lajnë dërresat në një pus që si për ironi, dikur nxirrte naftë, ndërsa sot u hitë vakët.
They go far away from their homes in order to find water, just for washing their clothes. Their underground water cannot be drunk anymore. They have to buy the water, but now their water is not usable even to wash their clothes.
Lera që i kemi tëra këtu, mi shkojnë tu në dhe. Gjallë. Lirin tëra dhe. Tëra shatra, për të pirë flori. Kurse për të larë, unë një deri tani dhe nuk erdi botën. Tani një botë mbushi një...
And this is, I think, the last
Morën vesh në shpërtimi që unë djeti në shtëpi që kemi afër aty. Nuk na ndan as 80 metra gjatë. Që kemi pusin afër shtëpimit.
Çfarë bën në ato momente kur e mor vesh?
So, in few words, those are the videos. Here you can see the places where Bankers Petroleum stores its oil.
Fshatin Marinës të Fierit dita tjetër është edhe më e rëndë për banorët.
This shows the aftermath of the explosion.
Që solli shpërthimi I puseve nga rrjedhja e gazit.
It is like a volcanic explosion.
Unë për vetë time nuk jetojnë do të këtu, desha shpinë me ka për djali lekët I ka papaguar, dhe shpia u prish pra.
People cry because they have no money. They say our homes are ruined. We don't know how we're going to live.
Rrjedh këtu të unë ku jam unë, nuk rrjedh.
Shtëpi, biznese e rrugë të zhytura në baltë, ndërkohë rreziku që vjen nga gazi është ende aty. Si pasojë e shpërthimeve të puseve të gazit këtu në fshatin Marinës të Fierit, për shkak të punimeve të kompanisë Bankers Petroleum për nxjerrjen e naftës, rreziku më I madh për banorët, por edhe për vetë rrugët e fshatit, është krijimi I këtyre xhepave nëntoksor, të cilët nga momenti në moment mund të rrezikojnë dhe vetë banesat. Të tilla ka kudo dhe rreziku që vjen prej këtyre gropave thithse është edhe më I madh.
It shows holes created because of the explosion.
Petroleum se gazi nuk është I dëmshëm, por I ëmbël të mbështetur dhe nga Ministri I Energjetikës Gjiknuri, janë dëshmi e braktisjes dhe papërgjegjshmërisë qeveritare, ndërsa apelojnë për ndihmë.
Kam 35 vjet tu ditë I Kalamak, se ça bëhet. Ai më flas ka mua ka bësh shpitëre ato. Kush ka bësh shpitëre këtu? Ai ka që kohë me të kasolla, po pse ndroj kilometrat e ky ja ktheu. Ja bëri kilometrat bardha sot.
Kemi ikur sa po ashtu kam hequr fëmijët, kam ikur te vllai, I kam çuar andeja. Edhe në këtë drejtim tash ne kërkojmë ndihmë nga shteti. Urdhë, banohet me në këtë drejtim.
Asnjë fëmijë mos të vinë në shkollë, se fëmijët janë me bark, janë me të vjella. Ju merr rëmend.
It shows that children cannot go to school, they are having side effects, they are vomiting. They are sick because of the gas explosion, because they didn't have only water coming out, but there was gas which poisoned the people.
Falë që gazi I lëshuar nga kjo nuk ishte hidrokarbureve, I shtresave hidrokarbureve, nuk ishte helmus.
Albania ka dalë garante për dëmshpërblimin e këtyre. Ne do ngrem komisioni dhe do fillojnë dëmshpërblimi shumë shpejt. Prandaj ju kërkojmë banorëve qetësi, maturi.
Por premtimet për dëmshpërblim për banorët janë vetëm fjalë.
Do ju shpërblemi, thaj, I pa ato dhomat, aja të plastra. E ku vjen puna ka 6 muaj, 1 vit.
People are complaining because now the Bankers Petroleum is telling to them that we will compensate you for the damage, but they say we have complained even before and they never compensated us because these frackings, this is the last that happened in last December, are happening for many years since the Canadians came there and the people cannot do anything about it.
Ndërkohë që prokuroria e Fierit ka nisur hetim për shkatërim prone dhe ndotje të ambientit.
All right, I hope. Okay, so coming back to the bankers again, because I want to show you the connection. First of all, the question that everybody here might have is, how come we didn't hear this news in the BBC or CNN? Of course, you'll never hear about it because this is a company, Bankers Petroleum, which is directed by the ex-general of NATO. And as this picture shows, made by some Albanian activists against Soros, most of the wells where Bankers works and extracts the oil are owned by this fine gentleman whose name is Soros. So what we see here is we have, because we started the presentation with the collapse of communism, the mass privatization and taking of the wealth of the people in Albania and Kosovo by Western corporations, and now we see this major industrial accident that is happening in Albania, and our government does nothing about it. Bankers Petroleum is operating in Albania since many years, and it has paid 0 taxes to the Albanian government. And when our journalists were complaining and were telling to our government, why doesn't Bankers pay at least a tax for the oil it extracts? Bankers was saying, oh, we have invested a lot of money, we have an agreement that for all the money that we invest in here, we're not going to pay tax until we recover our expenses, and they pay nothing. They are destroying for the last 10 years the homes of these poor Albanian farmers. If you go to these villages around area of Patos and Marinas, which is not very far from Corfu. Corfu is here, if you know the map, this is the Adriatic Sea, and Italy is here, Brindisi is here, which is very close to Italy and Greece. They're stealing the oil of the Albanians. They don't give any tax to the Albanian government. They destroy people's homes, and they do not pay any fine, and our government doesn't send them to the court. So people were asking the government, okay, Bankers doesn't give us compensation for the villages for the land that they poisoned to us, for the homes that they destroyed to us, but at least you as government come and do something. Government was doing nothing. If you go to this area in Patos, you'll see people's home cracked. You'll see parts of their walls falling down. Their land, their soil, they cannot plant anything. It doesn't grow anything anymore because the soil has been poisoned. And our government doesn't do anything against bankers. Bankers do not pay any tax because, of course, we have these big gangsters who run the show. This is another map which shows the oil fields that George Soros, the company that he is a shareholder, owns in Albania. So this is the map of Albania. And as you can see, more than half of Albania, the oil is owned in a way by a company where Soros is a shareholder. Now, the enigma was finally solved in Albania in February 2017. Because what Soros has done with nations of Eastern Europe, apart from privatizing or stealing their wealth, Soros engages himself in regime changes. I'm going to talk about it a bit later. And one of the ways how Soros controls the governments of Eastern Europe is by taking over the judiciary system and the media of these states. Since 2014, Soros Foundation has been sponsoring a project in Albania to reform the justice system. And this reform led last year to the changing of the constitution of Albania. According to the new constitution that this American ambassador and Soros Foundation forced the Albanian government to approve, Albania has lost its independence. If you want to be a prosecutor in Albania or a judge, the prosecutor's office cannot appoint you to be a prosecutor. Our president cannot appoint you. Our parliament cannot appoint you. But the Americans have built a commission which is called the International Commission of Control, which is supervised by American and European officials. And they are the people who do the vetting. They're the people who look at your resume and they say, okay, you can be a judge or a prosecutor or not. So as you can see, this transnational elite of people like Soros and Tony Blair and others, they do not only come into our countries to steal our wealth, but they take even the independence from us. And in 2017, we had a big fight in Albania between the American ambassador, his name is Donald Lu, and our prosecutor general. Because what the American embassy does against Albanian politicians who do not obey to them, they blacklist them. They put their name into some files of FBI, cancel their visas. They are not allowed to go to the United States. In few words, they are declared terrorists. But this is a very frightening thing for our Albanian politicians. So in February, we had a big clash between the American ambassador and our general prosecutor. The US embassy canceled his visa. He could not go to the United States. He was upset because he said, why you are doing this thing to me? I'm doing anything you are telling to me. And then he said, among others, I haven't even filed charges against Bankers Petroleum. And when the journalist asked him, what are you saying? He said that I had many requests to start an investigation against Bankers Petroleum for the fracking they are doing, for the taxes that they are not paying to our government, but the US ambassador told me, don't do that. Can you imagine? And here are even other medias, and these are Italian medias who show this incident, show how we had a fight between the American ambassador and the prosecutor general, and our prosecutor general accused the American ambassador as being man of Soros and following Soros policies. This is from Italian media. And this was a picture that I promised to give you in the beginning. This is a guy who was running Albania. I mean, he was the chief advisor to our government. He was coming every 3 or 4 months. So these are our ministers. So these are Prime Minister, Minister of Interior, Deputy Prime Minister. This lady, she's interesting. She's the head of World Bank for Eastern Europe. So we have always the bankers, aren't they? And here is where they agree on what kind of taxes they would level on Albanians, because it is something. After the collapse of communism and the destruction of our economies in Eastern Europe, our states are bankrupt. They do not have money to pay their employees. And the corruption is extreme. I mean, if you become a minister in Albania, or if you become the director of a city town, or, well, I mean, a commune in a city, whatever, very soon you can become a millionaire, a billionaire, because corruption is so high, and for each and every road that is constructed, for each and every renovation that our government does, for each and every school that it does, people steal more than half of the money. But this money that our government has for running the government does not come from the GDP and from the taxes of Albania, because Albania is a poor country, doesn't make enough taxes for our government to pay our teachers, our police, our army, and what have you. So where does the money come from? It comes from the World Bank and IMF. When this Eddie Rama, Tony Blair, this is how I call sometimes our government, Blair and Rama government came in power in 2013, the national debt of Albania was something like 60% of our GDP. Now, after 4 years, our debt is 90% of our GDP. So you can imagine how much money we're taking. And here is Blair and the head of World Bank, I forgot her name, but her surname was like Gold something, she should be Jewish. And this is how our government was working. It looks interesting, isn't it? And now a question that many journalists were making to Tony Blair when he was appointed chief advisor to the government of Albania was that who pays him and how much money he takes. So Blair was saying, I'm not being paid. And you think that Blair works for free? There is no free lunch for the British, isn't it? And many journalists were asking, because when Tony was coming to Albania, he was coming with his private jet, and people were making calculations, so he was losing so much money. And I mean, people could not believe that Tony Blair, after converting into Catholic, decided to become a Mother Teresa. So where does Blair get the money, was the question. Well, we don't know how much money Blair gets, because there is something, I mean, in Albania, most of the money is outside of the system. For that thing, we are a bit free country. We're not as controlled as you are here in England, where you have credit cards, and the government knows even when you buy a Pepsi Cola, and they write everything. So where does Tony Blair get his paycheck from? There are different allegations in our press, but something is claimed more often, that when he comes and he spends his holidays in Albania, he prefers Albania, and I'll show you fine pictures of him with our prime minister during the summer. Some people say that they spend their holidays in a result of a man called Clement Balili, who now is being hunted by Interpol, because as a major drug trafficker in Europe. So some theories are, I mean, at least he spends his holidays in the resort of this big gangster. And another way how Tony Blair gets paid is together with his former spin chief, Alistair Campbell, and his nephew, they get very good contracts by the Albanian government. But the person who gets most of the money, okay, this shows how Tony Blair goes with helicopter and meets Eddie Rama, etc. But okay, here is when they're spending their holidays in Himara, south of Albania. It's very nice weather. He comes every year, and our prime minister prides himself because he wants to show to us that he is part of the global ruling elite. So here's the money, Cherry Blair. So the main, or let us say, the money that we know that Tony Blair gets officially from Albania goes mainly to Cherry Blair. All the court cases that Albania has in foreign courts outside of Albania are being handled by the office of Cherry Blair. So she gets millions, and some of this money is proved. Look, she's also in Albania. All right, okay. Albanian government has approved an increased payment of 645 euros for legal advice given by Cherry Blair. So she got maybe $500,000 euros, and then she got some other because she wanted more. And Cherry Blair is so famous that she gets money even from Kosovo. This is, for those that might know him, Ramush Haradinaj, one of the TLA leaders during the Kosovo War, who was sent to Hague together with Milosevic for war crimes, but surprisingly he was left and declared innocent. But Ramush Haradinaj was arrested in France around 3 months ago, if I'm not wrong. And we had again Cherry Blair getting 360,000 euros for representing him in France. So it's a big money. At least this is the official one that we know. All right. Now, after giving you some examples from Albania and Kosovo, how this transnational elite, after it conducts war in certain countries for bringing democracy, for liberating people from dictators, for supporting the right of self-determination, etc., we must ask the question, who runs the show in Eastern Europe? Why are the Hungarians, Serbs, Macedonians, Georgians, Russians, Albanians, Ukrainians, Egyptians, Belarusians, Germans, Syrians, and Americans complaining against Soros? In all these countries, we have groups and we have politicians who complain against Soros and this transnational elite. These people are some unelected people who come into our home countries, who invest a lot of money, and who take over our governments, overthrow them, and bring the governments that they want. But time after time, what happens is that people protest. Like in Ukraine, there are huge segments of the Ukrainian society that know that the coup that happened in Ukraine was sponsored by Soros. In Georgia, people protest, and they even booted out Saakashvili from power. And by the way, Albania serves as a main basis for many operations that Soros does in the world. After Saakashvili was fired, he came to Albania, and he also became an advisor for our government and takes money from our government as well. Because our prime minister himself, Edi Rama, and Erjon Veliaj, they are two people of Soros in Albania. They were people who were brought to power by Soros, people who came from the street, like Macron in France, people who nobody knew about them, but who were sponsored by these bankers, were inserted into certain political parties, and then they were turned into kings. Edi Rama was no one. He came in Albania from France in 2009 or 8, if I'm not wrong. He was sponsored by Soros to become the mayor of Tirana. During the time that he was mayor of Tirana, Tirana was totally devastated by illegal constructions and big towers that were built in each and every park that we had in the city. And today, Tirana looks like only an atomic weapon can save our city, because it cannot, I mean, it is so overpopulated. We have no green spaces in our city. And it was Soros who brought him, made him first mayor of Tirana. And later, when he lost, and when the Democratic Party came in power in 2015, and the opposition had a huge file of corruption and bribes of our Edi Rama, and they wanted to send him to jail, we had Soros coming to Tirana and told openly in TV to our Prime Minister, Sali Berisha, told to him, you do not dare to touch Edi Rama and to do what Putin did with Khodorkovsky, because you are not Putin. And Edi Rama is still there. Now, these posters, This is very interesting. This poster is probably 2 months ago. It's from Macedonia. Does anybody know what is Soros doing in Macedonia? Well, the thing is like this. In Macedonia, we have a nationalist government headed by Gruevski, Vomero. This government is very, in a way, now it is becoming pro-Russian and does not want to put Macedonia into NATO. So for the last 2 years, or 3, Soros and US Embassy, they have done all kinds of tricks to remove this government from power. And now, after the election happened, they are doing all kinds of tricks to remove this government from power. And in Macedonia, Soros is sponsoring the party of Zaev, which is a socialist party, who openly says we will put Macedonia into NATO. Why should Macedonia join NATO? Because the neocons in Washington, as you all might know, are preparing for a big war with Russia, and they do not want to leave any country in the Balkans who doesn't join the military alliance. Now, how does Soros take over the governments? He uses subversion. He creates so-called civil society organizations, and some of you probably might know them. Organizations like Otpor in Ukraine, Zuber in Belarusia, Khmara in in Georgia, Mjaft in Albania. And with these organizations, what does Soros do? What he's doing now in United States, organizes protests against the governments, accuses the governments of being corrupt, because Soros is a master of mass mobilization and manipulation of masses. The governments are put under pressure. We have the Brits and the American ambassadors who join him, and they tell to the governments, I'm sorry, you were elected by your people, but we don't care, people don't love you, so get out, or else we will send you to Hague or we will bomb you. And this is how Soros takes over governments. Well, this is an article which speaks about that. Here is the article about Saakashvili, who became advisor to our government. And here are some of the faces of our government, and a poster, an article in our press. So here is our foreign minister, minister of integration, I think mayor of Tirana. I cannot see all the faces. And what happened with our government when it came to power in 2013, the government of Prime Minister Rama, all the ministers that our Prime Minister put into position before this had worked for Soros Foundation, or the Open Society Institute, as they call it, or for the Mjaft, Enough movement, which is the sister organization of Otpor and Khmara, this subversive organization that organized coups in Serbia, in Georgia, in Ukraine, even in Egypt against Mubarak, and in Syria. So Soros also creates his own medias and the pundits, the analysts. I do not know how accurate is this picture, because I got from some anti-Soros websites, but it shows in a way the most influential journalists that we have in Albania, who are or were in one way or another sponsored by Soros Foundation. All right, and this other poster shows the sources of power that Soros tries to control in our societies, in this case in Albania: the government, the opposition, local governments, the business, media, civil society, the prosecutor office, and the courts. And this is what Soros has managed to take hold almost. Probably not so much of the local government and the business, but the others are quite accurate. Now, Soros, apart from working in an occult manner Sometimes even he does mistakes. For example, in 2013 13, after this Rama Tony Blair government came to power, the first thing that our prime minister did is he increased taxes and started jailing people who didn't pay their water and electricity bill, brought very draconian laws that people were revolted, and we had mass protests in Tirana. Soros was afraid of a popular revolt against his government, so he wrote to Hillary Clinton and told to her to intervene in Albania and to tell to our opposition to keep shout and do not touch his man. And this news was leaked by WikiLeaks. So here are the cable gates showing how Soros was using Hillary Clinton and the American government to shut up the opposition in Albania. These are some other articles which show how Soros orchestrated revolts in Georgia, in Ukraine again, and how he's provoking anti-Trump protests, things that you already know. Now, people in Eastern Europe are organizing themselves against the Soros tyranny. We have anti-Soros movements throughout Eastern Europe. In some countries, like in Hungary, you have the brave Orban who goes and faces Soros publicly in European Union and everywhere. In Albania, we have movements in Serbia, and this is the latest movement that was created in Macedonia called Stop Soros Movement. What people are asking in our part of the world is, they say, Soros, please leave us alone. Get out of our countries. All right, but Soros, he doesn't work only in Eastern Europe. There are allegations that he funds organizations even in Syria. We know for sure that Kmara, Otpor, and Mjaft that we had in Albania, they trained the activists who overthrew the government of Mubarak in Egypt. So Soros is everywhere. Wherever you see a conflict, you see Soros. But as you can understand, Soros is not alone. Soros, in a way, is the cheap gangster who does a dirty job for this transnational elite, people from Clintons to Tony Blairs. So he is the ugly face who uses his name to reach the policies that this transnational elite want to do against other countries. Okay, here's a picture again. And here is Soros, who came to Albania in 2013 after we had a massive protest by the people. The protest was huge, was like the protest that you saw in Egypt against Mubarak. But it was not a Soros-made protest. It was a popular revolt who wanted to overthrow the government of Edi Rama. And then we had Soros coming to Tirana, and he's talking with Lulzim Basha, the head of the Democratic Party of Albania. And as you can see, they're intimidating him and telling to him, keep shut. His coming to Albania was not reported by a single mainstream media in our country. Whenever Soros comes, the media do not show anything. He goes off the radar. And here is, Victoria of the EU Newland, because when Soros comes, even Victoria comes and advises the head of our opposition, and of course they know each other because you cannot be the head of the opposition at least in Albania, if you don't love America very much. And they come and advise him to behave himself and to be a good boy. Very lovely picture, isn't it? Wow. Okay, apart from taking over countries, this transnational elite does even something else. They create terrorism. You have seen this picture, isn't it? Of these jihadists in Syria being sponsored by the US aid. In Albania, when the Arab Spring started and the West wanted to overthrow the government of Assad in Libya, we had mass protests by certain manipulated Muslims. Some of them ended up and became jihadists in Syria, who were being praised by our government and the American medias. Many of these terrorists, jihadists that your government is fighting today, who were in Syria now are coming back, and the media tells us, be scared, they're coming, they're going to kill you. They were allowed to go there, and sometimes even they were pushed to. While the Wahhabi ISIS jihadists of Syria now have officially become terrorists, and they will either be drowned or jailed, there are other terrorists which countries like Albania are hosting in this very moment. This organization that you see here is called the Mujahideen al-Halq. They are Iranian terrorists who have been assassinating and still do assassinate many Arabs, Iranians, even Americans once upon a time, who, after removed from Iraq, were taken by Albania, 3,500 of them. And this is a picture of John McCain coming to Tirana on April, when was it? A month ago, and tell to them, keep on fight, we are with you. So we have good terrorists and bad terrorists that this transnational globalist elite creates. And this guy here, for those who have seen pictures of Mujahideens in Syria, he's the most famous Albanian Kosovar. He's by Kosovo, by the way, terrorist. His name is Lavdri Muhajeri. Those people that have seen pictures of those jihadis when they declared their bogus caliphate with Abu Bakr Baghdadi and they were burning their passports. He's the guy who's burning his Kosovar passport. And this guy, before joining ISIS or Daesh, he was working for, guess who? NATO. He fought for NATO in Iraq and Afghanistan and was trained by them. And the Kosovar media had to admit it themselves. And there, we had a very interesting article that I forgot to include it here a few weeks ago in Albania, that most Albanians from Albania who joined the jihad in Syria, before this, they had served for NATO in Iraq and in Afghanistan. Do you see the connection? But still, we have good terrorists. John McCain is praising them. And here is the mayor of Tirana, the guy who led the protest to overthrow and to destroy the Socialist Party of Albania, because our Socialist Party once upon a time was headed by Fatos Nano, who was more socialist. Of course, he was not like your Corbyn, but he was, in a way, more socialist than Edi Rama, who is chief capitalist. So he's the mayor of Tirana, and he's the #2 guy of Soros in Albania. He makes very nice posters, but you see the reality of Albania today. You have people eating garbage. These pictures are not from Syria, but are from Albania. Beggars who sleep in the street. While in the era of communism, of course, we were isolated. We didn't have too much freedom of speech, but we didn't see people like this sleeping in the street in the time. And George Soros is very famous. We have even streets in Albania named George Soros. All right, and finally, after Soros and this transnational elite, they do all this mess throughout the world. Finally, after creating conflicts in Eastern Europe, in Middle East, they bring us, the victims of regime changes, into your doorsteps. This is the famous declaration of Soros in 2015 when he said that Europe needs at least 1 million refugees a year. So get ready, Europeans, we're coming. Soros is bringing us to you. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have somebody from a region of the world that doesn't normally get the opportunity to speak on a platform in the UK. And somehow I doubt you are very surprised by what you've heard, but it's something else when you actually see it pulled together in the way that Olsi's shown you today. And of course we sense the passion, because obviously you're talking about your home country. And all I can say is, you know what, you're very welcome to Tony and Sherry. Because we sure as hell don't want them here. But there again, we actually wouldn't wish them on anybody. In fact, I still have this vision that in my lifetime I will see Tony Blair in a jail cell. So Olsi is going to be around for the next couple of days, so do take the opportunity to have a chat with him, because this is a unique opportunity to actually get to feel for what's happening. And you know what? I heard people gasp when you said that these companies, these fracking companies, are coming into Albania and pillaging the resources and not paying any taxes. You gasp. That's exactly what is going to happen here. Exactly. So, we gasp when it's somebody else's country and we accept it when it's ours. Something really not quite right. They really know how to play us, don't they? And if we think that George Soros isn't having any impact on UK politics, why do you think Tony is announcing that he is keeps announcing that he's intending to return? It's I think worse than the bogeyman for us, I tell you. So thank you so much, Olsi, and I hope we'll see you again. Thank you.